says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Unfortunately, we're here to break down an instant reaction loss to the North Queensland Cowboys. Doing that, as always, is my good mate and co-host, Sixties. Eels went down by 8 points, big fella. Frustrating loss, but I'll tell you what, as much as I'm going to be critical of a lot of things, the Eels actually did a pretty good job in the second half mitigating potential damage here.
Mate, I'm all sort of mixed up emotions at the moment. There's a part of me that's actually really proud of the boys and the fight that they had in them. There's a part of me that's highly disappointed with some performances on an individual level and on a combination level. There's a part of me that's a little bit enraged about some decisions, not all decisions, but some decisions. Mate, it's a matter of keeping some composure, pushing ahead, doing what we can to be as analytical as possible. But because the Cumberland Throws a passion project, mate, we're not going to avoid the emotion that we have after that game.
No, sir. Yeah, there's plenty to be very critical about, including the officiating. But the Eels were their own worst enemies here. 60s, poor defense, a lack of direction in the first half, in particular in attack, and just some soft moments that allowed the Cowboys to capitalise. And we mentioned it in the preview that they've got the strike to punish you if you're going to be lax and lazy, and that's what they did to the tune of 24 points. Let's go through the numbers quickly before we get into the minutiae here.
But before we get into the numbers, mate, our sponsors who had us, Big Swing Golf at Northmead, we had a function at their fine establishment last night. And fortunately also we were joined by Greg from Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. So we had a bit of a get-together. Can highly recommend anyone going down to Big Swing Golf at Northmead. I know they have some indoor sports leagues with their golf simulators during the week, but they're also there for get-togethers, work crew gatherings after work for a few drinks, watching the sport up on the big TV, having a crack at not just the golf simulators, but there's a whole lot of sports simulators that are there. So we had a big crew of people down there enjoying themselves. So a shout out to Big Swing Golf at Northmead. You're not going to go wrong if you get yourself down there and enjoy their facilities. So,
if you have anything close to a passing interest in golf, it's a lot of fun. The simulator is really impressive, and you can play on some of the world's finest courses as well. So you get to have a crack at Pebble Beach and St Andrews if you're crazy enough, given how unforgiving some of those courses are. But yeah, it is a lot of fun. We had a great night, 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks to everyone that came along as well. And but now, unfortunately, we've got the reality of breaking down an Eels loss. So as much as we were having a lot of fun last night, maybe not so much fun tonight. And before I go on as well, we had the 2GB continuous call team at Parramatta Leagues all day today. So they were there from 1 in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night. We had two of the best plugs given to the Cumberland Throw by Mark Levy during his stint chatting this afternoon. I got to meet all the fellas there, shared a few yarns. Of course, our mate Spiro was in fine form down there, mixing with all the punters in Jack's Bar and Grill. I did say to the continuous call team, I said, listen, you fellas have pinched our gig today. but they gave the plug for our match day gigs down there. So yeah, it was a bit of fun. Really enjoyed the time down there. So again, it was Parramatta Leagues Club making Jack's Bar and Grill, making the club well, today, not just the home of the Eels, but the home of rugby league.
Yes, sir.
So it was a good day, and I hope people that got out there really enjoyed themselves.
And let's talk about this defeat now, 60s, starting with the try scorers for the Cowboys. Peter Hicker got on the board with what must be said was a soft try in the 3rd minute. Semi Valame winning off a forward pass in the 10th. Got his double in the 25th with Scotty Drinkwater completing the 4 tries with an inside run on the 54th minute, or in the 54th minute. Holmes went 3 from 4 for try conversions, tacked on a penalty goal, and also got time in the sin bin. So a very mixed night there for Val. On the Eels side of things, Sean Russell was our lone try scorer in the first half before Clinton Gutherson got Mitchell Moses over twice in 5 minutes, in the 69th and 74th minute. Mitch 2 from 3 off the tee, just missing one narrowly to the left. And then no penalty goals, no sin bins for the Eels. Probably contentious about whether there should have been a penalty goal there for the Eels 60s. We chose to take the tap restart, nearly scored. And I do respect playing for the regulation time win, but I think mathematically the penalty goal was miles away the best option there in terms of trying to take this game the golden point and give yourself the most time to play for that 6-point try in the wake of that 2-point conversion.
Yeah, and I think it would have well and truly put the pressure on the Cowboys if they'd have been kicking off to an Eels team that had reduced the margin to 6 points when it was 20 points only minutes before. It was, I think there would have been something playing at their confidence, playing at their nerves in those last few minutes. I'm with you. I think we should have taken the 2 points there. And you know what? That could have also worked in our benefit when it comes to points differential at the end of the year.
Yep. And the other thing too is that playing for Golden Point wasn't necessarily a negative thing in my mind, because the Cowboys were, like we saw in the grand final qualifier last year, they were wilting massively. The Eels were running roughshod over them in that final 10, 12-minute period. And if you'd taken the Golden Point, I'm not sure if they could have held on.
No, I agree. That I wanted that 2 points to be taken. I wanted us to be running home over the top of them with that from that kickoff. And as we saw the night before with the Raiders scoring like 2 tries in a minute, who knows what would have happened there? Who knows if we could have gone the length of the field, scored a converted try, and then had time for the next kickoff and maybe a field goal attempt.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I mean, that's all conjecture. It's literally when you're 8 points behind now as it finished up, it's wild conjecture.
Yep.
Right. So,
Let's have a blitz through the macro numbers. Possession relatively even. Cowboys ahead 51 to 49%. About 40 seconds of time possession in their favour. So, yeah, really not much in it there. Cowboys very efficient in their completions, 85%, 36 from 42. Eels at 69% at the end, 27 to 39. There were a lot of mistakes in the first half in particular. Eels more dominant on the ground. They had 180 runs, 172, but went for nearly 100 more metres. So they were more efficient and effective on the ground there. In terms of line breaks, 8-4 for the Cowboys. Tackle breaks pretty even though 40 to 38 in favour of the home team, the Cowboys. Average set distance for the Eels, 5.5 metres in their favour. The play the ball speed, I do not know how the average play the ball speed is even close. 3.63 for the Cowboys versus 3.7, because I felt like we were getting pinged anytime we tried to compete in the ruck. And the Cowboys...
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're still the slower with the play the ball speed. Still the slower average play the ball speed, but getting pinged.
Yeah.
Like, it was telegraphed that we were going to be pinged for that early in the game. And we
got done for inside 10 multiple times early on for penalties and didn't get one back on the flip side when the Cowboys were being ultra aggressive in defense the entire game. So you copped that one, I suppose. The offloads, well, the Eels went crazy in the final quarter of play, 31 to 6 here. So that was a big one there. I think that's the season high for any team.
And can I also say then, because I think this relates to line breaks, there was probably plenty of times there where the Eels, their play was almost the equivalent of a line break, where we were just surging with offloads.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like a clean line break, but
retreating defensive line.
Rolling through.
Was like tantamount to a line break, exactly.
Yeah, because when I saw that the line breaks were, what was it again? Was it 8-4?
8-4 in favour of the Cowboys, yeah.
Yeah, when I saw that, I thought that that can't be right. Like the Eels were running roughshod. Some of the attacking football that we were playing in the back half of the game was absolutely some of the best that I've seen. And look, to be fair, the fact that the Cowboys were scrambling enough to hold Parramatta out was, I mean, it said quite a lot about their defensive attitude. I mean, like we had them really tired and wilting, but they were as game as anything. There would have been plenty of games this year where if the Eels were throwing that sort of attack, there's been many opponents that we've had who would have just got blown off the park. Like it would have been like that, those moments against the Dolphins in the first half, in all seriousness. Like that was, like there was some magical play that we were doing. But anyway, I digress for now. You obviously, people are going to get the impression about some of the things that I'm going to talk about just from that then. But sorry, mate, back to you with those stats.
Incredibly, in defense, for all of Parramatta's struggles for the first 60 minutes of the game, they were by far the better team for effective tackle percentage. Cowboys down below 80%. You very rarely see that. 79% flat. Eels 86.5, a tick over that. 39 missed tackles for the home team versus Parramatta's 41. 9 ineffective tackles for the Eels, which has got to be close to a season low. 45 ineffective tackles for the Cowboys. Those offloads devastating that sort of primary defensive contact. And that's why the Eels came home for wet sail. And like I said, if they had another 5-10 minutes, they would have run them over. For all their issues in the first 60 minutes, for everything that we're going to be critical of, they were coming home for wet sail. 10 errors from the Cowboys to Parramatta's 12. 4 penalties conceded by the Cowboys to Parramatta's 8. What's new?
And I just want to stop you there. That was actually less penalties that we got tonight than the season average, which is like 4.4. Right? We couldn't even get up to our season average. But it's no surprise that we received 4 penalties. 4 penalties. And what you saw tonight, we can't really comment on it because we're only getting the television angle. But the commentators spoke about the lightning line speed of the Cowboys tonight.
Which is usually a telltale giveaway.
Yeah, exactly. They're up super fast. Why are they up super fast? You know why they're up super fast. They're leaving early.
Yeah.
They're leaving it, and it's straightforward like that, you know. But I mean, I can't say that because it's an assumption. It's an assumption based on the rushing defence that we saw, but the commentators also letting us know that it was you know the lightning fast defensive speed, line speed that was happening there. So, but. It's no surprise. After that post that I wrote about what was happening with the Eels, that, and mind you, I think we're going to start creeping in terms of how many penalties we're copping against us these days. But it fits in perfectly. Like as soon as the Cowboys hit 5 penalties, I knew we weren't going to win the penalty count because we just don't get above 4.
And again, I do want to stress that for pretty much all the Parramatta penalties or calls against us, I'm happy to cop them on the chin because invariably I feel like they're mostly right. But my grievance is with the fact that teams are clearly, being mischievous in the ruck and whatnot and getting away with a lot. And it's just not been blown both ways. So very frustrating. Just wrapping up the game incidents here, 60s. Wanga Blake on report for a shoulder charge. Ryan Madison on report for what they indicated was a hip drop tackle, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. I didn't think there was anything in it.
We spoke beforehand, and my first look at it, I thought that most of the contact was made with the ground rather than the tackle player. So I would be stunned. Anyway.
And then in terms of the individual stuff, big fella, offloads, obviously a big one here. There's a couple of players with 7 in the team, Clinton Gutherson and Bryce Cartwright. No surprise for Bryce. He is an offloading extraordinaire, but Clinton Gutherson, very productive there. Multiple offload days for Penisini, Simonson, Barlaw, Hopgood, Davey, and Ryan Madison. So prolific offloaders across the board there. In terms of other important stats, I think Guffo had an outstanding game, 3 try assists, a line break assist. Sean Russell 2 line breaks, and then Will Penisini a line break and a line break assist. And I thought Will played pretty well, honestly. I think it's one of my bones to pick with his team is that I know that Mitch and Bryce have a fantastic combination, but we need to spotlight Will more. He's just such a good player, and it feels like we don't get him into the games enough.
Yeah. So, mate, the injury to Shaun Lane.
Oh. Where do you start on that one? I mean,
knees
to the head.
Before we get on to the incident, this is a season from hell.
Trial game, broken jaw. Comes back, plays a handful of games, tears his hamstring. Comes back, plays a handful of games, and then gets, knee in the head, and some way, somehow gets contorted into falling on his elbow or having pressure on his elbow in a way that dislocates it. Like that wasn't foul play, that part there. It was just freakish. I do have issues with the use of knees in the contest for the ball, given what we've seen both with Reagan Campbell-Gillard and Marty Tapau and Harry Grant.
There'll be nothing to see there, mate. There will be nothing. I can guarantee.
Oh, you're 100% right, but I personally take umbrage with it. But my God, your heart goes out for Shaun Lane. And look, he was clearly underdone tonight as well. The big fella going up into the tough tropic conditions, 80% humidity, 60s. I know it was only 21 degrees, but it was 80% humidity, and he was struggling out there on that left edge without Dylan Brown. And as much as we spoke about how important Shaun Lane was for Dylan Brown, I think is a reminder that Dylan Brown is important for that left edge, given what we saw defensively out there tonight, a complete lack of communication and execution in the defensive systems. But poor Shaun Lane, man. One of the most cursed individual seasons you're going to see. Other players have had more horrific long-term injuries. We saw poor Hayes Dunster have his knee shredded going back a year and a bit now. But in terms of just back-to-back-to-back serious injuries, none of which are season enders in their own right, but all of them taking out multiple months of playing time. I don't know what he's done to deserve this in terms of walking on the ladders, breaking mirrors, but all I can do is wish him a speedy recovery, the big fella.
Already at this season, the number of players that we've missed through suspension, which is 22 weeks of player availability, injury, which I haven't tallied at the moment, but we'd be heading up towards 20 with Shaun Lane on his own by the time this season's finished. So we get to add in anyone else. And then, of course, Origin stand-downs. So the Eels are table leaders by a long shot when it comes to the suspensions. We've got 22 weeks of suspension, and the nearest to us is the Dolphins with 12. So, I obviously have a concern that our discipline isn't what it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly doesn't fit. You can't argue with the suspension of Sevo.
No.
You couldn't argue with the suspension of RCG with the knees. It wasn't the dog act that a certain journalist was ripping in about. Let him say that to the bloke's face, right? Try and do a story or go and chat with him, and then say to him, mate, your tackle was a dog act.
By the way, I think you're a dog on the field, and you don't play for any integrity, which is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some journalists out there who are really starting to push the bounds of what is a defamation in what they say. I guess that maybe they're getting out of it by saying, they're being descriptive in their opinions rather than making it as a statement of fact.
It's the natural extension of the clickbait meta, isn't it? Where you keep pushing and pushing the limits, and there's a lack of face-to-face, not even confrontation, but they were literally bemoaning. I say they, the plural, they, the media, have been literally bemoaning with that player strike from media, how most media these days is just done over the phone anyway. They have very little face-to-face contact with players, so it's created this buffer where they feel like they have a degree of separation or protection that allows them to really step some lines.
Yeah. So we're not arguing about some of those suspensions, but certainly we've fallen foul of officialdom this year. We received the least penalties by a long way in the NRL. We sit 17th for penalties received. So it's not just, we're not bemoaning the penalties that are ruled against the Eels. It's just the Eels they can't get a penalty going their way. They literally can't. I mean, when you're averaging receiving 4 penalties per game, it's almost that your opposition is near perfect. Like it's astounding. And we see teams that spend so much time wrestling in the ruck, slowing the ruck up however they can, jumping early so they're offside. We see that much interference, and the fact that the Eels can't get penalties, it's frustrating. Yeah, I mean, you do hear the natural home crowd calls at Combank Stadium, the boos and what have you, looking for the offside penalties, looking for the slow play the balls. But that's because they're standing out like dog's balls. They're that slow to play the balls that the Eels have to cop.
Well, in this
game, you
game,
don't lose the play the ball speed every week.
In this game, we literally saw, in terms of how useless the touches are, we saw a forward pass for a try. We saw Bryce Cartwright reach out and touch a juggled ball from, I believe it was Murray Taulagi, which would have been a knock on. And we saw Murray, I think it was Murray Taulagi again, score a try where he clearly knocked on about 5 times, and it went up a try. Like, he literally scored a try and put his hands out saying, I do not know if I scored that, and they awarded it. Like, I'm not saying there's an agenda, I'm just saying that they're terrible.
Yeah, well, I think we need to come back to this with the appropriate stinger. So let's push ahead with, first of all, when we were talking before, John, you came out with what I suggested should be the title of this instant reaction podcast.
Yeah. Well,
so let's lay it on the listeners.
Usually you come out of these ones and you have the rugby league cliche, it was a game of 2 halves. And in a way, this game was a game of 2 halves. The Cowboys had that big lead in the first half and the Eels came back in the second. But more so than a game of 2 halves, this was a game of 2 edges, wasn't it? Parramatta's left edge, leaky, dysfunctional, discombobulated. They were not on the same page. Parramatta's right edge looked elite. Moses, Cartwright, Penisini, and except for that one error rucking the ball out, I thought Sean Russell had a very good game. You could not have more contrasting efforts from the 2 sides of the field here.
Yeah, so basically we saw from Dejan has had some struggles reading the defence, and it's not, we're not talking about just the missed tackles. We're talking about like his positioning and where he's drawn in or not. Now, he's being measured up against one of the finest defensive halves you'll come across in Dylan Brown. And we know that there were tries tonight that would not have been scored if Dylan Brown was defending. Likewise, there would probably be tries that we've missed out on if Dylan Brown had been playing. Like, it is with players in there that don't have the combinations, don't have a history of combinations, and players who've probably played more lower grade than first grade, there's going to come a point where trying to get that consistency of performance becomes a struggle. Dejan was outstanding in those first few games for the Eels, and playing like he caught people by surprise with how well he played. And that's not to say that he's not a talent. If you're playing first grade, you've got talent. So let's be very, very clear about that. However, I wouldn't say the wheels have fallen off, but there's been a little bit of a struggle in the last few weeks. The Warriors game, this game, and look, even in the victory last week, there were some struggles. Tonight we saw Bailey Simonson, I would argue, probably had his worst game at centre for us. He's had some fine games at centre. He's been one of the standout performers since switching from wing to centre. But
that sequence of play where we talked about the difference between the bad offloads and the good offloads that the Eels had in this game, but we went full manic football mode there, and it culminated with him playing tunnel ball and yeeting the ball into the stands blind. And it wasn't on.
No, it wasn't on, and you know, so it's like when you see problems on the outside, you look at what's happening on the inside, and there was a real disconnect between Deja and Lane, Bailey Simonson, and of course Wonga. Wonga is so devoid of confidence. It's, you know, I don't think you can feel anything but sorry for Wonga. Like there was that moment today when he got the ball on the sideline, and he sort of came to a full stop, and it was like that was in the second half, and it was like he just didn't know what to do. And, of course, he got tackled. But given that it was the last tackle, it probably didn't matter much whether he'd given it everything he had to dive into the corner and got pushed into touch, which it would have happened most likely.
He hit the handbrake 60s.
But he put the handbrake on and it was the last tackle.
Like,
so
I know Mike Acevo has been copping it this year for, like, you know, whether it's been a lack of production in terms of the rucking or how people feel like he's been attacking in certain situations, but he was a huge out this week. There were a couple of times in this game, Gutherson had a beautiful cutout pass to Micah Wong at one point, and obviously that play you just mentioned there, where there is no doubt Micah goes in. Like he will pin his ears back and score it. And for all the legitimate, I'm going to say, complaints, there's plenty of merit to a lot of the discussion. But for all the complaints, what an out that was tonight. You know, just huge. You know, and like you said, Wonga is clearly a man just absolutely shot in confidence, and to the point where I would argue he's almost unplayable. Like I don't know what the options are outside of him, because Hayes clearly wasn't ready to go today because he was the actual named replacement for Micah, so he clearly got dinged up some way somehow.
Yeah, he did.
But outside of that, I mean, you can push Bailey to the wing and throw a back rower into the centres, but bear in mind, we're already short one back rower, maybe two, depending on what the MRC want to do to us. But Shaun Lane
and
is
not
obviously
only that, BA is not going to move players around to cover.
Well,
like,
he might have to, because you can't play Wonga. Like on what I saw tonight at 60s, you cannot play him. A man that isn't going to attack the goal line to get your team back into the game, you can't play him.
No, I can't disagree with that. I just don't know what the options are, because, as I said, we have just lost so many players.
By the way, we might also be able to pick Wonga because he's on report for a shoulder charge. So, like, that might be taken out of our hands, in which case you either hope that Hayes is back. I mean, that would be the easy option, clearly. Or you move Bailey and play the back rower, or after that, you're talking Loomy or throwing a rookie in like Arthur Miller-Steven and just saying sink or swim, Rook.
Yep. Now, we've got. Have you got any more you want to add in there? Because we've said how we weren't happy with that, our left side, and they're complete disconnect.
Defensively, I don't like how we deal with players, especially halves, crabbing across the field. I don't mind them letting them get outside, but then it feels like the interior cover defense gets sloppy and allow that cutback runner to punish us. It's not just this game. I feel like it's happened a couple of times this season. So I would like to see that addressed. Aside from that, I feel like a lot of our issues were more execution rather than the systemic failures. I really liked what Joe Effengay did in the first half, but I've got to give him a big, whack on the head for the worst advice on a captain's challenge we've had this season. His ball carrying arm touched the ground twice. You got to be cognizant of that. You got to be awake to that.
Yeah, so, and he clocked off defensively.
He did. He did
try.
for the cutback try, exactly, for Drinkwater. And I at the same time, while I'm chastising him for that bad challenge, I do want to point out the stupid hypocrisy of the rule. The fact that passing off the ground is a penalty, but offloading late and a held tackle comes back for the play of the ball. functionally they're exactly the same thing. Like in terms of gaining an advantage from a broken play a dead play, but one comes back for a play the ball, one comes back for a penalty. Go figure, rugby league. But yeah, I'm sure there's some other stuff that I'm missing in terms of what about players? Just trying to think here. Maybe not. I really do want to shout out the efforts of Clinton Gutherson here, 60s. I thought he was.
Yeah, well, let's get into the praise because there is plenty from this performance that I can take a positive from. Because if ever there was a game that was set up for the Eels to be completely blown off the park, let's put it all together here. For a start, you've got a game up in those conditions, as you said, with the 80% humidity up in North Queensland, and a surface that they talked about was extremely dewy. So the likelihood was going to be there about a lot of lost possession.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got the Eels' left side, which, as we talked about, just was almost non-functioning. The complete strangers to each other out there. So and then exposed early by the Cowboys with 3 first half tries. So the scoreline's there. Then you've got some tougher times that were brought about with some of the officiating. Tough times that were brought out by the Eels' own play and errors. And you're thinking to yourself, what can the Eels pull out of this after that first half? And the Eels' second half, there was so much courage in that half. Like there was so much resilience in that half. They didn't get anything in the way of bright attacking football out of the left edge, but they got a little bit tidier in terms of defence and individual commitment to defence. The right side, I thought, were absolutely outstanding tonight in both attack and defence. Bryce Cartwright went to another level again tonight. Like his 7 offloads, they were all quality.
Effective offloads, I know, yeah.
They were quality. And in amongst it, he was asking questions of the defence with his runs into them. Like he was on another, as I said, he was on another level. Gutherson was like, he was right up there. Moses in attack he was threatening all the time. Will Penisini was just like it was the Will Penisini that we're used to. We had 2 weeks ago, Will was crook. He was crook. I can tell people right now, I don't mind saying it because it's a few weeks ago, he didn't train. And then I heard that he was sick. And then that was the week they played the Warriors. And we saw how he struggled in that game against the Warriors. That wasn't Will. That was a player who was not well at all. It was not well. Will was not Will because he was not well. So, and what we've seen in the 2 weeks since is what we were seeing earlier in the season. And he was phenomenal tonight. I can't find too much wrong either with Shawnee Russell. There was the one lost possession, but apart from that, he ran courageously into the defence.
He did.
So, as you said, this was really a game of two edges, and look, the forwards, I can't really complain too much about them either. I mean,
yeah,
like
Junior had a fair game. Hopgood, solid. Obviously, Ofengari had his moments in the second half that he would like to have back. But yeah, I mean,
Brendan Hands, 51 tackles. Yeah, 51 tackles.
There's no doubting, and only 3 missed in those conditions, by the way. It was a bad night for Mitch Moses in defence, 10 missed tackles, but the Cowboys ran a lot of traffic at him, and with the dewy conditions, he obviously struggled in that regard. But
one of the things that Mitch Moses does really well is he puts his body in front of the players.
Yeah.
And there are a number of times where he's credited for a missed tackle and he's basically knocked the player off their run. And he mightn't finish off the tackle.
No, that's fair, but he lets his cover defense get there in time and do. I mean, in saying that, in recent weeks, he's absolutely taken a few monsters to school like David Fafita and company, but in this particular night, yeah, it was a case of he let Cartwright and Penisini and whatnot arrive in time to save the day down the right edge. But yeah,
I also want to shout out to Cardi and Hopgood. So Cardi, 37 tackles.
Yep.
On top of
7 offloads, 100 meters.
Yeah, that was a phenomenal effort. And Jermaine Hopgood, 34 tackles, only 1 miss in that 34 tackles. So the workload of those 3 players was it was something else. So look, there's, as I said, there is plenty to be encouraged about, but you're right. We've got issues that we have to try to solve on that left-hand side. And I think a lot of it's going to be solved. Hopefully it will when Dylan Brown comes back. We don't know where his headspace will be at. And we're not going to dive into, what might be playing on his mind or what have you. It's just straightforward. He's going to be, we don't know what his headspace is going to be. And whether he can focus on football. Because if you talk to footballers, they will tell you if they're happy and they're settled, that's when they play their best footy. When they can push things, they've got nothing that plays on their mind, they will play their best footy. And we've spoken to players about that. We've been fortunate to get that sort of insight. So who knows what that means for Dylan coming back? He's only 1 week away from that. Unfortunately, we have to face the storm.
Who apparently got an all-time spray from their coach, Craig Bellamy.
Well, we don't want to be. That's probably the time you don't want to come up against the storm.
Yeah, after being embarrassed.
We have to face them, and we have to face them down in Melbourne, and we have to face them where, again, we are probably going to be further weakened with absences because Shaun Lane will be out, and we don't know whether there's going to be more suspensions. I mean, it will probably be typical of Parramatta season if Ryan Madison is suspended. I think it would be ridiculous because, as I said, I don't think he made contact with the player. I think most of that contact was with the ground. And in fact, he was on the... I'd maintain, even without looking at it again, I would maintain his knees were sliding along the ground, not coming down on the player. So... And when I say sliding along, I mean he was being dragged by the player, not sweeping with his legs way up in the air. I believe they came down on the ground beside the player, but I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. Who knows? I mean, I've been wrong plenty of times in the past. But, mate, so the stinger, time for the stinger.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
Where do we start here, 60s? I mean,
we could start with another reference to what your good friend in the Para podcast put together last week when he completed his dossier on all of the refereeing errors that happened in last week's clash between the Eels and the Titans. And we should say to anyone listening, he completed a dossier with errors relating to both teams.
Yeah, it wasn't.
He wasn't looking for one thing or the other. He was just writing down all the mistakes that were made. It was, I got partway through it and I thought I don't even need to read anymore. Like this is almost too much to take in. So you've got plenty that you were unhappy about in this match, mate.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of alluded to some of it already, but it was an ultra inconsistent ruck. There were some really bad runs where the Cowboys were able to neuter good Parramatta runs with extra efforts in the ruck. We mentioned that Semi Valame's first try was off a very obvious forward pass. Bryce Cartwright got a knock-on from Murray Taulagi that was missed by the officials. Murray Taongi's try, and what was given a try went up as a try when it clearly it should never have gone up. Look, the Eels have a historic win rate of 40% under Grant Atkins. Like, it just, there is something about how he officiates these games that ends up not just bad, but miserable for us.
He just doesn't like the way that we play our football.
Yeah.
We'll bring it back. We'll say, for the sake of being fair, we play a brand of football that he's not terribly fond of. So we're obviously doing something wrong. There must be plenty wrong that we're doing this season, because the statistics don't lie. You can't have a team who is a team that I've heard Brad Arthur rip into the team. I've heard him tell reminders to the players about discipline. I hear them at training barking orders at each other about getting their feet behind the referee in the defence line, like it's one of their calls. That's how, like, they are so cued in to doing everything possible to avoid being penalised. I mean, they are literally, they're not looking for an edge through pushing the boundaries of the rules. They're actually looking to not fall on the wrong side of the referee. But something is going terribly wrong, because we're the worst team in the comp when it comes to receiving penalties. We are now 22 weeks and counting of suspension. And I repeat, 10 weeks worse than the second worst team. I mean, there are teams out there like Penrith. I think, from memory, Penrith's only suspension this year was a carryover from last year. I mean, that's what you call a highly disciplined team. That there just isn't any fault that their players have had. The numbers stack up. We can't talk about that the Eels didn't deserve those 22 weeks. Something is going terribly wrong for us. And as I said, I can't work it out. I watch them train. I hear the coaches talk to them about discipline. I hear their calls to each other, reminding each other about doing the right thing. We all see it at the games. We see how quickly they get up off the tackle. There is going to be no Parramatta supporter that would argue about the speed that we allow the opposition in the ruck with the play the ball. I'd almost argue that they throw out that discipline right out the window, because it doesn't matter. Like, I'm talking about, like, not pushing the bounds, because, like, I'm literally thinking they get refereed as if they do push the boundaries, that they do push the limits of the rules. So they may as well go the F ahead and push every boundary that's there, because it's making not one scrap of difference in the penalties that they receive. It's not making one scrap of difference. Like, the opposition's near perfect. That's just how it is. The stats speak for themselves. The opposition is near perfect every week.
Yep.
Do you get the feeling I'm over this, mate?
Yeah, especially when you have, like, serial offenders in a neutral, like, scenario coming into a game against Parramatta and miraculously becoming ultra disciplined. It is incredibly frustrating. So, yeah, I feel you on that, my brother. But unfortunately tonight, the Eels on the wrong side of the ledger on both the scoreboard and in the penalty count. And I think there's a connection there, because while the Eels did play poorly for a good stretch of this game, if you take away the Semi-Valame try and you take away some of the other calls that led to tries from a penalty inside the Cowboys half, that would lead, I think there was one where maybe it was the Valame try too, but Chad Townsend massively milked ruck infringement. Like, the Eel wasn't even touching him, but he sort of flopped onto him and got a penalty. You're talking about between 6 to 10 to 12 points on the scoreboard, which completely changes the complexion of the second half. So, and that's true.
Yeah, one of those. There was one of those early. It might be that one. I don't know, but there was one of those early penalties.
And look, I say,
to be kidding me.
I say this knowing that this is true of almost every game. There are passages of play where penalties can influence a sliding door sort of thing. But it's very frustrating when it's consistent with the Eels.
Yeah, look, I want to go to pains to emphasise here that the Eels were still masters of their own destiny tonight.
Yep.
Right. Calls didn't go their way. That they weren't the match-defining moments. The match-defining moments were basically that our left edge leaked 3 tries in that first half and just looked all at sea in defending. And if you're looking for the reason why the Eels lost tonight, bang, there you go. And even with a forward pass, you still go, you know what? They were taken apart there. Maybe the try should not have been awarded, but they were taken apart to set up that moment, to set up that pass. So they have to look in the mirror. The videotape has to be pointing squarely at the failure of combinations to get the job done as it should be done tonight.
Definitely, mate. And
so, in us being critical, we know what to expect on a weekly basis. We've got the stats there. The Eels have won the penalty count 3 times this year.
That's actually
3
crazy.
times.
That is actually insane.
The Eels.
We're at the end of round 21. End of round 21, 60s.
Yep. The Eels have had a faster play the ball speed in one game. In every other game this year, the play the ball speed of the opposition has been faster than the Eels. Some of them even approaching a full second faster. But it is so we're talking about significant stats that are ultra consistent. The Eels receive less penalties than every other team in this competition. The Eels have had players suspended for more weeks than any other team in this competition by a country mile. These are the things which we know are true. And I don't know, as I said in the post the other week, the Eels can control things like suspensions to their players.
Mm-hmm.
The Eels can control some of the things most of the things that they're being penalised for. What they cannot control is how officials determine how a judge, how their opposition is from a discipline perspective. They've got no control over that. So what I'm proposing is if the Eels cannot get any penalties, if every one of those penalties that the Eels concede is deserved, there is still something that's not working then. And they may as well go to pushing the rules, the boundaries of the rules, because goodness knows sticking to the rules and working hard to stick to the rules, to be disciplined, is not working one scrap when it comes to decisions that are made in games.
Mm-hmm.
Rant over, mate.
Yep.
Time for our 3, 2, 1?
Yeah, let's get on to the cap of a nightcap here for the game with our best on-field. And, I dare say it's probably going to be from that right edge big fella because they were the shining lights in this one. Oh, also, I count Gutherson as part of the right edge in this case. Yeah.
So it's a real toss-up between 2 players for me.
Mm-hmm.
For best on field, Clinton Gutherson or Bryce Cartwright. And because I don't think I've been able to give Bryce 3 points this year, and although we can't use the qualifier of would they have won without them because they didn't win, I say would the Eels have been able to make a real match of it in this game to stay in the contest without either two? No, they wouldn't have been able to. They were instrumental in so much of the positive things that the Eels did, and because of his work rate with the 37 tackles on top of the threat that he posed in attack all the time and the 7 offloads, I'm giving my 3 points to Bryce Cartwright. Therefore, I've already telegraphed that I'm giving my 2 points to Clinton Gutherson.
Yep.
A real captain's knock, 7 offloads himself. His ability to find those tiring players around the ruck. What you saw tonight in the play from Gutho around the ruck was pure classic Gutho, King Gutho. That is when he's at his best, when he's lurking around the ruck, when he's looking for the dart out of dummy half or taking a quick pass off the dummy half to explore in behind the ruck or to support runners. He was just he was so good tonight. And then the 1 point, you know what? Moses was really, really something else in attack. A few too many missed tackles. I'm going to go for the real workhorse tonight, Brendan Hands, for 1 point. Like over 50 tackles tonight.
Yeah.
You know, right.
I'm swapping my 3 and my 2. I'll go the captain, Quinton Gutherson, for 3, and I'll go Bryce Cartwright for the 2. But my 1 point will go to Will Penisini. And that's a big shout out there to Brendan Hands, to Junior Barlow, who I thought tried his backside off. Shawnee Russell, also very good, and Mitch Moses too, who, obviously those tries don't happen without him backing up on Guffo. But yeah, I'll go for Guffo and then the 2 big fixtures on the right edge tonight for mine.
Yeah. Well, mate, that brings us to the conclusion of an instant reaction, which was really, really tough to do. Again, thank you to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf, Northmead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta. Again, thank you to Parramatta Leagues for hosting 2GB today. It was I thoroughly enjoyed being out there in Jack's Bar and Grill as part of the audience this week rather than being behind the mic. It was a nice little change of scenery for me there. And good luck tomorrow to our NRLW team, who are going into their first match of the season with, unfortunately, a couple of really key outs in Elsie Albert and Rachel Pearson. You probably couldn't have picked 2 more significant players to lose the day before the match. And also as well, shout out to our Jersey Flag and New South Wales Cup teams who are doing battle now at St Mary's Stadium out there behind St Mary's Leagues Club. The match has been shifted from Wentworth Park. So they're on it, I believe, Jersey Flag at 2:15 and New South Wales Cup at 4 o'clock. I will do my utmost to be out there, perhaps doing a live blog. I'm going out to the NRLW match beforehand. I have a really tight timeline with getting from St Mary's then out to Sydney Airport. All sorts of stuff going on at home as well. I cannot make guarantees that it will be there on TCT, but I will do my best. I need people to cover for me at home. I need people to, and I need times to work out and travel times and all that. So I'll do my best tomorrow, mate. But we wish all those teams all the very best.
Nice way to wrap up, mate. And for those that got through the entire podcast, thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys in the next episode.
Go you Eels.